Hello, fans, collectors, and investors. Welcome back to Iconic Baseball. I am Iconic Al, and today we're continuing on my top 100 countdown of the greatest and most iconic ball players in baseball history. Today we are at position number 76, and it's a left-handed pitcher, the first one we've had, I think, on the countdown so far. He's a guy who really defies belief with some of the feats he has accomplished in the game. Most notably, he has the MLB record for most consecutive wins by a pitcher with 24. 24 consecutive wins without a loss, which is insane. His postseason ERA is 1.79. He has the distinction of throwing 2 complete game shutouts in 1 World Series. I could go on. He's best remembered for striking out 5 upper-tier future Hall of Famers in succession in the 1934 All-Star Game. You know who those 5 players were? Babe Ruth, Lou Gehrig, Jimmy Fox, Al Simmons, and Joe Cronin. Struck out those 5 players in succession during an All-Star game. Pretty remarkable. But that almost overshadows what he was able to do as a career pitcher. I mean, he was able to amass 253 wins. He was an MVP twice. This is before they had the Cy Young Award, mind you. And his career ERA was 2.98. So, I mean, we're talking about a player who was ridiculously dominant. We're talking about maybe a Jacob deGrom type of talent, if you want to compare him to a modern-day pitcher. Probably would have been comparable to a Jacob deGrom type of guy, where he was just dominant. Every time he goes out, he has the potential to completely shut down the other team. Carl Hubbell. That's who I'm talking about. He played about 90 years ago, and I'm sure they looked at him much the way we look at Jacob deGrom today, as a freak. I use that term in an endearing way, but that's what he was. Introducing the great Carl Hubbell.
Take me out to the ball game. Take me out with the crowd. Buy me some peanuts and cracker jack. I don't care if I never get back. Let me root for the home team. If they don't win, it's a shame. For it's 1, 2, 3 strikes, you're out at the old ball game.
Okay, Carl Hubbell, one of the great left-handed pitchers in baseball history. End of sentence. Now, while I talk here, I'm going to show some footage. This is going to show some original footage from the 1934 All-Star Game that I referenced in the intro, where he struck out Ruth, Gehrig, and Jimmy Fox, and Al Simmons, and Joe Cronin. You're just going to see Ruth, Gehrig, and Fox, I believe, on this video. But as I went through a lot of the numbers in the intro, but Carl Hubbell had 68.2 WAR, more of a peak guy, meaning he didn't have a long period of dominance, but I mean, when he was dominant, he was dominant. He was, like I said, New York's original Jacob deGrom. This guy he must have been a lot to deal with for a hitter. And God, he struck out the best batters in baseball history, basically, in this clip here. But coming back to the items themselves, I have 2 Carl Hubbell items, and here we have a 1934 batter up Carl Hubbell, which is one of my favorite pre-war cards. I like this for a bunch of reasons. First and foremost, just being the image. I mean, just look how crisp and clean that image is. Never mind the 2.5 grade, but the image is so crisp and clean. You see a lot of versions of this card where it's more of a faded sepia or a blue tint or a pink tint. I love that this card is not faded, tinted. It's just this crisp image of Hubbell rearing back, ready to unleash hell on the glove of the catcher. But yeah, this is a 34 batter up Carl Hubbell, graded at 2.5. And I love that it's from 34 because that's the year of the famous All-Star Game where he struck out those batters that you just saw. And I think this is a blank back. They're all blank back. And this was a card that would have been punched out so you could stand up the card. So it's kind of hard to find these, the ones that remain intact, because I'm sure they got played with. This is a 90-year-old card, just about. And I think this is probably a good opportunity to talk about population reports on cards like this. Pre-war cards, and especially obscure pre-war cards of not common sets. People have this preconceived notion that all vintage is rare. That's not true. I mean, it's all relative. But vintage like this is truly rare. Just to give you some perspective, I'll just pull out a random vintage card, maybe a 62 Topps Willie Mays, let's say. A 62 Topps Willie Mays. You know how many are on the PSA population report total? 3,000. So there are 3,000 graded 1962 Topps Willie Mays in any grade, just total. You know how many of these have been graded by PSA? 62. So we're talking about 62 cards. I'm sorry, 63. My mistake. 63 total have been graded by PSA in any grade. So that it's a different style of collecting for pre-war because it's eye appeal, and really the grade is secondary because just to have the card, that's the trick. To find the card is the trick. When you have 63 graded examples, that makes it hard. But it also really puts a floor in the market because they're just not floating around out there. There's not many copies of that card around from Carl Hubbell's prime playing days. All right, so this is my Carl Hubbell signed baseball. Again, it's got some toning on it. It's a Charles Feeney, who I believe was a National League president back in the 70s. And so this was probably signed 50 years ago. So it shows some toning there. A little bit of fading on the autograph, but hey, 50 years, what do you expect? And he was probably of pretty advanced age by this time. But I kind of like it. It actually has a little more character in my opinion. Being a 50-year-old signature of a guy that played in the 30s. So I love it. A ball like this tells a story of history. So there's my Carl Hubbell single sign baseball. One of the all-time greats. All right, well, thank you for joining me on another episode of The Countdown. Feel free to like, follow, and subscribe if you have not already. And until next time, keep collecting and stay iconic.